Hey guys, Chris Adams here. I'm going to walk you through my next spinning rod build. I'm headed out to Smith Lake for the Bassmaster Southern Open, March 1st through March 8th. And I need a rod that has a nice bend, but it still has some backbone for drop shotting for spots. Now, my first spinning rod I've got is actually an SJ 842 by MHX. This rod is a spin jig rod, which I have an 842 that's made up as a spinning rod, and I have an SJ 843 that's made up as a casting rod. Now, this rod has got a little bit more, a little bit stiffer tip. I can throw flukes, I can throw weightless trick worms, and it really still has that backbone that I need to catch fish, up 5, 6, 7 pounds, whereas it still is finesse. I also throw this rod for redfish and trout when I'm fishing inshore. What I've got is I've got a Shimano 2500 on this, and I've got it laid out the way I want it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in the DS 822. This is a blended rod. It's got a little bit more tip. It'll flex a little more, but it still has the backbone. And this is actually a high modulus rod. This rod is considerably lighter than just the standard MHX blank. So this is something that I'm going to stand there all day and drop shot at Smith. I can really do it, and my wrist isn't going to get tired, and it's very, very sensitive. Now, I've got the approximate grip length that I like for me. I also want to make sure that the rod is balanced very well, because if that rod is tip heavy and it wants to nose down all day long, it's going to put a lot of strain on your wrist. So what I'm going to do is I've got it laid out. You can see some markings here. This blue tape is where the grip is going to push down and stop. So I'll know when I slide this grip down this rod blank, I know to stop it right here. Okay, this band right here is where I'm going to actually build up an arbor for my American Tackle Arrow reel seat, which is the same reel seat I've got on here. I try to keep everything the same so that when I go from rod to rod, it all feels the same. So this reel seat is then going to slide down, and this is going to be the stopping point. As I build this up, and I'm going to build 3 arbors right here to have this reel seat sit in there and be nice and snug. The grip's going to come down first, the reel seat's going to come down next, and after I pull the grip down, I'm going to clean all this off and build up these arbors, and then after that, then I'll run my Pro Paste epoxy in there, and I'm going to take and slide this down, and it'll stack up nicely, and then I'll clean it all up. And then from there I'll go with my guides, and I also run no foregrip. I actually run this little cone. This cone sits right on the nose of that Arrow reel seat. So you can see it here. I've got the Arrow reel seat, EVA grips. It runs right here to the cone. I just run a little bit of a thread color there because I like the way it looks. I've got a drop shot hook keeper. It allows me to just use it for top water, for jig heads, and for those little drop shot weights that get kind of annoying if you can't control them. So this is the layout. This is what it's going to look like, and then I'm actually going to move on and put the American Tackle microwave guide system on it. It really lets that cast get out a little bit farther, kind of controls your line a little bit. And I run all braid. This is going to be braid, and then I put on fluorocarbon leader out to the tip. So I'm going to run the microwave system guides. And then my running guides will be small. They'll be number 5s out here all the way to the tip. What that does is it's small enough and light enough that it doesn't get bulky, but it also lets me cast that knot, which I actually tie the Alberto knot, which is a really, really small knot. I used to do the uni to uni, but once you learn that Alberto knot, I think it'll really improve your line breakage. It's not going to be as bad, and it flies through those guides a lot smoother. So that's what I do. I run the braid to sunline fluorocarbon. When I'm drop shotting, I use 8 or 6, and from there it'll really fly out of those guides. So stay tuned, and we'll get it all lined up, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, let's get ready to get this grip on. With rod building, there's a lot of little parts and pieces, so make sure you get your winding checks on here first, because once that epoxy gets on and the grip starts coming down, then everything is going to have to follow behind it, and you can't come in after everything's glued up and put winding checks on. So What we're going to do is we've got the 2 winding checks here, the one that goes on top of the rear grip. This, I have not glued this rear grip on, and I have not pulled. This is the rod decal. That's the label that comes from Mud Hole on there. That goes on last, and the reason is after I get everything laid up, if I need to put an 1/8 ounce or a 1/16 ounce or a little bit of a weight in the butt of this rod to make sure that it's perfectly balanced, that allows me to do so. So what we're going to do is we've got the 2 winding checks on here. They're on correctly. For this DS822, I've got this grip set up, and the 2 winding checks are a 12.7 millimeter, just the black vinyl rubber, kind of the cheap ones, but they do a great job because I'm going to put thread and then I'm going to epoxy over it. So I've got the 2-tone grip here, and before you slide it on, make sure it only goes a certain way in this arrow reel seat. You can see that's not the way. It's going to fit in just like that. So when it's going to snug down, make sure you've got it going the right way. Before you slide this grip on, make sure you give it a little dry fit to figure out where this thing stops comfortably, where it just slides down and stops. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start adding your epoxy here, because you can't slide this once it gets on. But once the epoxy's on there, start up here and epoxy all the way down. And what you're going to do is when it slides on, then it's just going to push it all the way down and then stop it. And then what you'll do is you'll just have to do a little cleanup here, a little paper towel and some alcohol, and get it squared away. So just approximately that's about where we're going to start. All right, guys, you can see I've got the grip run down the rod. I've got some epoxy, the Pro Paste down the rod, and I pulled my blue tape off. I put some epoxy down here to get it set up, and then I pulled my blue tape. So I have a good idea of where this needs to go in, and then I can always match it against my other rod. So I'm going to run this grip down. We're going to stop it right there, and of course, this band is also where your the arbors for the reel seat are going to go. So we're just going to stop it there. We're going to clean this off. Okay, now that I've got my seat grip on here, with my casting rods, I actually spine the blank before I do anything, and I actually spine the blank on this one before I did anything. But now that I've got my reel seat on and all that stuff, and I've got this piece of tape on here, that's right there showing where to stop. So I made sure that I didn't put the grip on backwards, and I've got my winding checks on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mark this blank and spine it. So what we're going to do is, as most of the guys will show in their videos, you're going to take it and you're going to put it at an angle like that. You can set it on the floor, and you're going to kind of apply pressure to this rod, and you're going to spin it in your hand, and all of a sudden you will feel it jump. And it's going to be bent like this, and it'll roll, and then it'll like that and jump. And where that is, that's the spine of this rod. So it'll jump to that spine, and then for a spinning rod, you want to mark the inside of it. So wherever that spine is, you're going to mark the inside, and that's going to be where your guides are at. For a casting rod, it's the opposite. When you run the spine, you're then going to put the guides out here on the outside rather than on the inside. So we've got the spine there of that rod, and I'm going to mark it so that when I slide this reel seat down, that it will be on the proper side of the blank. Okay, now that we've got everything cleaned up and this grip's on, I'm going to take and run 3 arbors right where this reel seat comes down. So what you're going to want to do is you want to run right here at the back, because this arrow reel seat's going to slide over your grip a little bit. You'll want to run in the back, 1 in the middle, and then you'll run 1 out here near the nose, and then that's going to stabilize it, and then you'll pack that Pro Paste in here in the middle, and then let it set, and it'll set up, and it'll be locked on. We've got the 3 arbors on now, and we're going to take a Pro Paste, we're going to fill in these right here, slide this thing down, make sure it's lined up with our mark here on the spine, and we'll be ready to rock. And with the reel seat is not tight on this rod, so all you have to do is pile in the epoxy in here. You don't have to add it to the rod blank to get it to slide like you do with the slide this reel seat down and make sure it's lined up with the spine. Before we get these guides on and start wrapping this rod, we're actually going to prep these guide feet. That's going to do two things. One, it's going to smooth out the rough edges of these feet. Sometimes there's a little bit of a finish on them, a little metal burr, something like that on the guide that is going to prevent it from sitting smooth on the rod. And then also we want to take and create the sharpest angle on this guide foot that we can, so that when we get it down to a really point, it will allow the thread to run up and then just transition and run right up that guide foot. If this is too tall of a jump, that thread is going to jump up and then fall off and jump up and fall off, and it's not going to provide a smooth transition. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this Dremel tool with a cutting wheel, and all we're going to do is run it and smooth this foot out and make a nice transition. Alright guys, so I've got the rod laid out. We've got my stripper guide measured from the spool of the reel, and I've got my tip on. So I'm just going to start wrapping. I use the nylon pro wrap, just standard black from Mudhole. I do put in either red or green trim wraps, and with this being a high modulus rod, I usually use a little gold down by the reel seat. That just kind of tells me it's a high mod, and when I'm showing people rods, it's easy to differentiate the two. Of course, you can feel the difference, but pulling them out of the rod locker. I like to keep everything as plain and basic and just fish with a rod as a tool. I don't get fancy. I do have to give huge props to the guys that do all the weaving and all those cool colors and stuff. It's just not for me. I'm not that good. I just make it as a tool. So I'm going to start wrapping. I'm just going to wrap down this rod, and we'll go from there. Alright guys, I've got everything finished up, everything laid out. I put the finish on last night late, just so that it can run all night without people walking around, and it'll dry. But I'm going to go through a couple things that I did that might help you out. I use the Pro Coat finish right there, and I actually buy the small inserts. You can see it's a small insert that actually fits down in the cap, and then that way you can take these little measured syringes and you pluck them down in the cap, turn it over, and draw it out, because this stuff needs to be exact, or as close to exact, equal measurements between the hardener and the resin in the blue bottle. They have separate syringes, red and blue, and it really needs to be exact. So I get these, buy the inserts. They're really cheap, and they just snap in and you poke the hole in them. Use the syringes. Of course, I get a big pack of these measuring cups. Makes it easy, throw it away. And you can also get the little stirrer sticks. I also just use these cheap brushes. You can throw them away. Sometimes the edges are a little, the bristles are a little crazy. I just take a real sharp pair of scissors. I tie my own flies for fly fishing, so I actually have some good sharp scissors. Then I'll trim those the bristles on that brush up so that it doesn't, sling that finish crazy when you're finishing the guide. So, but what you'll do is you'll measure it out. I usually take on one of these small syringes. I usually measure it to the 2 line or a little shorter, and that seems to give me plenty to finish any of the rods I've done, whether it be spinning, casting, any of that. And it also leaves me a little extra in case I need to come back and fill a little in. After 10 minutes and it starts to set up, I can fill a little in. As the guys in the video on mudhole.com will show you, when you fill this in, when you stir this, you don't want to go crazy. You're not beating eggs in this little dish here, because what's going to happen is it'll add air bubbles to it, and then it's just a pain when you go to finish it. But when you apply your finish, you don't have to be real delicate and overwork it. Go ahead and put it on and set your brush down, get you some exact lines, and then fill it in and let it do its thing. I've got it on a flex coat finisher, so I just let it roll, finish it out, and go from there. That's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions, make sure you hit up the guys at mudhole.com. Comment under the video. I'll try to help you out the best I can, but that's it. Thanks.